Hey everybody, hello again. This is Q&A with A and V. I am the V part, Vincent Racaniello, and Amy
I am the
Rosenfeld
A.
is the A part. Hello, Amy.
Hello, Vincent. Did you have a good day today? No visiting the studio space today.
I had a good day. I did a podcast. I did teaching my class, and now we are doing live stream with
Yep.
people from all around the world, including Brazil. 4.5
Yep.
million people vaccinated. That's awesome, Brazil.
What percentage of I don't care about the numbers. I only care about the percentage.
What's
What's
the
the percentage
percentage?
of the
Well,
population?
we could figure out the population of Brazil, right? Should we do
Well,
that?
that's too hard for me. That
Brazil
entails that entails using the
population
computer. No.
210 million.
210 million and they're at 5.
Yeah, what's that, Amy?
210? Not a large percentage.
Yeah, but it's still, they're getting there, you know.
Well, I
They're
can't
getting there.
complain because the United States, according to the New York Times site, is at 2.9% fully vaccinated. So 4.5 divided by 2.210,
Yeah.
it's the same. It's about 2%, which is basically what the United States is. Fully vaccinated is 2%, or a little over 2%, according to the Times website.
We're not doing very well in the U.S. We have 62 million doses distributed, but 10% of the
43,000.
population has been vaccinated. All
One
right, let's,
dose.
sorry?
One dose. Only one dose. It's like 2.9% of the population that is fully vaccinated.
Okay, folks, let's dive into our questions. Yes, I have new earbuds today. See, I decided to toss the big headphone look because when I used to be just an audio podcaster, that was fine because nobody saw me, right? But
Oh, so I get stuck with the big goofy headphones.
they look good on you, Amy.
It's okay.
All
I
right,
don't
so
mind the coof. I don't mind the flattening of the
I have to
coof.
say the headphones sound better. These are very tinny. But anyway, there you go. Here we go. Vaccinating mink might be wise if we continue farming them. Is there potential to promote vaccine escape in the same way that giving antibiotics to farmed animals can lead to antibiotic resistance? So I think vaccinating mink would be a good idea. We vaccinate many other farm animals like pigs and chickens and even fish. If you do it properly, you're not going to have an issue. Although, so there's a Marek's disease vaccine of chickens. It's a herpes virus. And apparently, it doesn't block infection and transmission. So there's some thought that this kind of transmission allows, higher virulence viruses to arise. So yes, it's good, and especially if you misuse these vaccines for animal. If you don't vaccinate all your herd, or you don't give enough, or you don't do all the boosts, whatever, it's a problem. You have to do it right. But I think that's a good idea to vaccinate the mink. And yeah. I don't know how many countries are going to keep mink farming. That's what I'm trying to say.
Although I did read an article that talks about that it's already in the mouse population. So I don't know.
Frank is having a hard time getting his second dose in New York. Well, I guess it depends what week. So New York is getting 200,000 to 300,000 doses a week. So, one day or so you might have a problem, but maybe not the next. So I'm scheduled next Tuesday to get my second dose. We'll see if they don't cancel it, right?
Well, so first, New York their supply just got increased like 5%. And second of all, I think that they automatically tell you. So at least at Columbia, you leave here after your first dose and you have to schedule your second dose. So you have a date when you get the first dose for the second dose. And then they can tell you not to come on the second day. But it's not random.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't just show up at the clinic, dropping off your, going to get vaccinated. They text you.
Yeah.
Plus, there's did you know that Shea Stadium is now an all-night vaccine distributing center?
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So it's 24 hours a day.
That's good. Must be cold outside, though. Shea Stadium is outdoors. Or does it have a roof? Oh, it might have a roof. I'm out of touch. When I went to Shea Stadium when I was like 15, there was no roof.
I've never been, so I don't know.
I don't think it's called Shea Stadium anymore, is it?
Well, whatever.
I think it's
place
Citi
where
Field.
the Mets play.
No, there's no more Shea. It's Citi Field.
Fine. It's Citi
And I think
Field
Citi
where
Field
the Mets
is.
play.
I think Citi Field is open, from what I remember. So Don wants to.
I'm sure that when they put the field hospital in Central Park last year, it was heated in the middle of the winter. So why can't they just do that technology to vaccinate you?
I think so. They could put up those portable heaters, right? All right.
Yeah.
Don wants to know, why was SARS-1 more lethal? And could SARS-2 mutate to become more lethal? So why was SARS-1 more lethal? Who knows? We never figured it out. But
I don't think you can say it's more lethal. I mean, you don't usually quantify virulence between viruses. Usually you quantify virulence between variants of the same virus.
That's true. That's what I teach in my course, isn't it?
Right. So I don't know that you could say it's more lethal. It's a different virus. It has different properties.
Yeah, but you can calculate a case fatality ratio, right?
Well, but you can't calculate a fatality ratio if you don't know how many people are infected, right?
Well, CFR is just based on confirmed cases. That's absolutely right. And so, yes, you are missing a lot of cases, but it gives you some kind of approximation. Let me show you this slide. May I show a slide, Dr. Rosenfeld?
Yeah.
Here, look
but you
at
do
this
have
one.
to admit, you do say that you can't ever quantitate virulence between viruses.
I say that. So here's CFR, case fatality versus R naught. And so let me turn off Amy and Vincent here so we don't see those. So here is SARS-CoV-2. CFR was, depending on where you are, 0.1 to 3, and SARS 10. So that's what we're working with, Amy, okay? So now the question is, why is that? And we don't know why, but it was good because at the peak of shedding for SARS-1, people were usually hospitalized. Over half of the people were hospitalized, so it was easier to contain the infection, right?
Mm-hmm.
Amy, do you know anything about what's going on in Israel with vaccination? You keep up with that?
So they're on schedule to be done by March, I believe.
Excellent.
And it's through them that we think that the vaccine reduces transmission.
Okay, yeah, let's hit the like button. Thank you very much down below. And thank you, Kathleen, that the sound levels are perfect. I did spend a lot of hours this week tinkering, and you can just ask Amy. I drove her crazy. I said, can you get on and do a sound check? All right, so this is an interesting question. Are you shocked at CDC saying that vaccinated people do not need to quarantine if they're exposed to someone with COVID? I think we need more data on that. Yes, I am shocked because we don't have the data. If you are vaccinated, you could still transmit, and that means you should stay home, right? So I don't get that. What do you think about that, Amy?
So I think that they're putting all their eggs in the basket that from some of the AstraZeneca data and from the Israeli studies that are ongoing, where it seems to reduce transmission significantly. That's what they're going on.
But we're not always in agreement with the CDC, right, Amy?
I'm not sure when I was in agreement with the CDC.
So we're seeing a bunch of people get their vaccines. It's great. Okay, thank you, Frank. No roof at Citi Field. I thought so. I knew Frank would answer. He's the New York person or one of them.
Yeah, but
Here we go.
he's got a cool house.
Yeah, I
Look,
don't
it's all
know.
glass with the green stuff on top.
It's
Looks
very
like
nice.
nature.
Floor to
I know, but it
ceiling
looks
windows, right? Floor to
Yeah,
ceiling windows.
but it looks like nature.
Sharon wants to know, what are your thoughts on the press conference statement for the WHO team about possible cold chain frozen products in the introduction of virus over a distance?
I think actually they ruled it out and they said it was highly unlikely.
But they seem to, what I saw is that they have some reports of 40 cases of pneumonia in October outside of Wuhan, correct?
90 cases of pneumonia that were in October in the Hubei province, and it's very large. So there, and then Linfa has a paper that talks about how a more closely related bat virus has been found in like Thailand and like thousands of miles away. So it sounds like their hypothesis is that somebody from someplace else brought it into Wuhan.
I think we ought to get Peter Daszak back on Twiv to get his thoughts.
Yeah, I would get him and Marion. It'd be a hoot. Yeah, for sure.
Well, I'm not going to get them together. Marion's very hard to schedule.
Yeah, I know. I think he has a lot to say. I think he
He's
is
coming
really
home now, right?
right.
He
They're
should be
leaving
coming home.
today. The 10th was his last day. He's leaving today. He's very clear about it not being from the lab, whereas the other person, the Norwegian guy, he's not as aggressively clear about that.
How much you pay for your vaccine here in the U.S.?
Zero.
Nobody pays here in the U.S., right? The government's paying for all of it.
Yes.
Frank says they're vaccinating at Yankee Stadium as well. Good, that's good use of this area, right?
Yeah, but Yankee Stadium vaccine opened up like earlier, like in the middle of January, and then they just opened Citi Field the 24. I don't think Yankee Stadium is 24 hours. Citi Field for sure is 24 hours.
Vitus says he had a COVID test 3 weeks ago, positive, rapid nucleic acid test, no antibodies 3 weeks later. Probably false positive. Yep.
Depends. I know you can't, you have to like have a little bit more information.
Well, no antibodies 3 weeks later.
No, there are some people who were positive who get reinfected, and the idea is that they get and have more severe disease, and it's because they didn't launch an immune response after the first infection. Daniel's talked about this.
You know, we did the AstraZeneca paper manuscript yesterday, and they had 6 people out of 350 who got the first dose and did not make any antibodies or T cells, non-responders.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So, most likely, but he needs to have a little bit more information before I concretely agree that it's false positive. Like that he's been living in a pod, that he doesn't go anywhere, that he's been masking up, blah, blah, blah. I mean, for you, it was very clear. Where were you going? The basement and here.
Is there anything mutation-wise that could promote fomite transmission? Any new variants more transmissible this way? So, AB, when they say transmission, they really mean drive through a population, not either droplet or fomite transmission. Because to prove that any mutation did that would be very difficult to do. So, could it happen? I suppose so, but I don't think we have seen that yet. Someone asked me the other day, should I wear 2 masks to stop the new variants from going through? But that's not what the variants do. They don't go through one mask. They just drive through the population more efficiently because they have some kind of fitness advantage.
Yeah, it's unfortunate what the CDC has been putting out.
Federico wants to know what happens if you get a vaccine 1 month after monoclonals. So Daniel says 90 days, right?
Yes.
So the idea is that, the monoclonals might bind the spike protein and, block it from doing whatever it's supposed to do. Is that the idea, Amy?
It could. Yeah. I mean, the other thing is the monoclonals could, yeah. I mean, it could block it. It could, prohibit it from being produced or, you know, target the target cell of the vaccine being destroyed. I mean, I don't think it's a good idea.
Tom says, with respect to low incidence of influenza, the MPI public health measures account for it, but I've seen viral interference evoked. Any evidence for that? What would be good evidence? So the problem is, it's not just influenza. It's enterovirus 68, respiratory, which, by the way, is Amy's virus. It's respiratory syncytial virus. Rhinoviruses, too, are down, right, Amy?
Yeah, so BioFire has a panel of respiratory pathogens from metapneumonia virus. Yeah, you can look on their website. They have the whole chart to RSV to parainfluenza to regular influenza, entero, and I think that there's even like some bacteria in their panel, and everything crashed when we went into close down or whatever it's called. And then you slowly see, and the only thing that really has come up is rhinovirus. It's a nice big blue band. And then we had this discussion yesterday, but within that blue band, which is thousands of cases, there have been like 68 cases of 68.
Anyway, Tom, the point is that it would have to be interference with a lot of different viruses, which seems to me less likely. So I don't see any evidence for that. Good evidence. Well, you'd have to show concurrent infections, I guess. But maybe an animal model would help you sort that out.
That's going to be really hard.
Yeah, I agree.
Because if you do mice, you have to, every virus has a different requirement for the mouse.
Would a vaccine containing spike from multiple variants be a viable broad-acting vaccine?
I don't think broad-acting is the right word. Would be a viable multivalent vaccine. Broad-acting suggests that you have like a common epitope against, spike of 16 different coronas.
Mm-hmm. The problem is it takes 6 weeks to test any new formulation, right? So you have to decide what you're going to include in that.
Well, that's why you do my idea.
Peptide arrays?
Sure. No, that wasn't it, but okay.
Michael said he's on deployment in Afghanistan. He's tested positive, and they want you to stay on the battlefield. Why? I don't know. Maybe you're talking about COVID, I presume, and maybe the CT value was very high, and they don't believe that you're transmitting. One possibility. What do you think?
I don't know what a battlefield in Afghanistan really means. Does it mean they don't want you to come home from Afghanistan? So if they don't want you to come home from Afghanistan, then I can understand it because you're getting on a plane with, it's kind of closed and a lot of people and long flight, So maybe they think that you quarantine in, it's not a highly populated country. Maybe they think you quarantine on the base in some area and then they can constantly monitor you. So that would be easier, right? I mean, I don't know. I don't know what stay on the battlefield really means. It's not a terminology that I understand.
So Shell wants to know about antibody maturation. Does that mean the antibodies will work better? Antibody maturation, you get high affinity antibodies, right? And so, yes, that's the idea. And today on Immune, we spoke to someone in Nussensweig lab who said the more matured antibodies appear to work better against some of the variants than less matured antibodies. So it's a good thing.
So at the end of the day, the immune response takes time?
That's an amazing concept, isn't it, Amy?
Yeah, considering the fact I was shushed the other time I said this.
I never shush Amy. Never.
You shushed. You did shush. You did the shushing. I was there. I know.
How does novel apply to the virus, or could SARS become novel? Well, it is a novel coronavirus. We'd not seen it before, right? And so it's already novel, the novel coronavirus. They started calling it that in the beginning, for sure.
Right. I mean, this is the problem when you label things like this and it's so pronounced, is because then you get emails from friends who aren't scientists and they say, oh my God, we're doomed because the novel coronavirus is going to last for years with us. It's going to be here forever. And you're like, yeah, but we're not going to be immune naive forever.
Yeah.
Like everything starts off with you being immune naive. And then you become less, then it becomes endemic because you're not longer immune naive. Like polio at one point started off that way, gazillion years ago. Like in Egyptian times, it was considered the new polio, the new, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's not because we're no longer immune naive.
Debbie wants to know if they did PCR testing for the SARS-1.
Yes.
2003, yeah,
for sure.
Michael, we're just on YouTube live streaming, nothing else. Thanks, Sandy. News from Israel. Hello. Reports on the news that high amount of people who got the second shot can transmit. I don't know how they know that. Amy, didn't they think that it was cutting down transmission? That was based on modeling, right?
No, it's based on testing. It's based on testing. Is that they gave a significant number of people the vaccine, and then they went out and they looked, or people came in and went for testing, and then they modeled their results of this test as if we had seen 10,000 cases, we should have seen, this is how long it should have taken us to get to there or something. You should talk to Jeff Shaman. He probably understands the modeling more than I do.
I'm going to get Jeff back on.
Yeah, I think
Did you
he'd
see
be
his
interesting.
article?
I did see his article.
In NPR, yeah.
I did see his article. It's controversial, to say the least.
Ace Wonder wants to know, are we hearing anything about increased sequencing from the Biden team?
Yes, they're into sequencing.
Yeah, I was on a call with one of the Biden team the other day, and he said, yes, we're ramping up, but I don't know what that means.
It means we're buying some sequencers and we're going to put them in a warehouse.
Do we know if people with long COVID have any long side effects from vaccines yet? Well, no, I don't believe it, right? Because we've only been vaccinating for a few months. But
right.
We'll see.
Not
right?
a few months, a few weeks.
A few weeks.
Yes. But I don't believe that they're anticipating that they will. I think that that's what Daniel alluded to last week.
Yeah. Let's see. Can anyone explain how Japan has such a low death rate? I think they're just really getting a lot of cases now, aren't they?
Yes. But they're also, they've always worn masks. They're very like follow the rules. They don't have people who like flaunt not following the rules. It's a whole different kinds of society.
Does AstraZeneca have reported effectiveness against variants like J&J did after 49 days? I haven't seen that, no. I have not
Wasn't
seen
it the
that.
AstraZeneca that failed in South Africa? That's why the trial was stopped.
They did stop their distribution.
Right, because it's not effective against the South African variant.
Yeah, the problem is that they only had 2,000 people. So they had a non-AIDS wing of the trial. It was 2,000 people. And it didn't. It's not enough. It wasn't properly powered. I don't think it was even a phase 3. So to stop the distribution based on that seems premature. But
well, I think it depends on whose rules you're going with. What we constitute for a phase 3 for the FDA does not mean that South Africa has to follow the FDA
yes,
rules.
of course not. They can do what they want. Absolutely.
So you have to go back and see what their rules are.
Yeah. All right. So here's something on the. Yeah, I think this is interesting. Japanese have a obesity rate of 3% and a low metabolic disease rate. So in other words, comorbidities are maybe lower in Japan. Don't they have other issues though?
I'm sure, but I'm not sure they have such an economic disparity as great as we do.
Yeah.
And it's a xenophobic environment, so I don't know that they would have some ethnicities or groups of people so like in a caste system like we do.
Yes.
But where's Devin when we need him? He's the Japanese expert.
Yeah, right. All right. Sapan says, I was reading up on adenovector vaccines. Read the DNA segments for replication and carcinogenic potential are removed. Yes, that would be the E1A region. How confident can we be of long-term safety? I'm fairly confident. I'm confident that these are long-term safe. They do not integrate. They are disabled. They do not replicate. They're cleared after a few days, so I don't see any issues there. And they've been used in HIV/AIDS trials for many years now. They didn't work, but they didn't cause any long-term problems. Here's one for Amy. How can false positives happen? As Vitus, who had his, positive PCR test and negative antibodies.
So false positives, it depends on the is determined by the CT value, and if it's really high and you have a very low amount of RNA and you're at like cycle 37, the primers are no longer specific, so you start to amplify things that aren't really your target, and so then you just get a fluorescent signal and the machine calls you positive.
Yeah.
It really has to do with how many cycles you do, what you're amplifying, the annealing temperature, what the sequence of the oligos are, blah blah blah.
Yeah, I think
there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. It's not, we do it in the lab. I pull out oligo sequences and I just willy-nilly draw them up. But for this kind of stuff, you're supposed to take a lot more time than the willy-nilly throwing of the dart that I do.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a small amount, as Amy said, there are a lot of issues, but if there's a small amount of RNA, the CT would be high, and that could be it. Mm-hmm. Susan said, what do you think of this story? The long-term patient who was infectious with the virus for months, this was possibly the reason for the B117. It's possible, because we do know that from some case reports that immunosuppressed people can have long-term infections. Yeah. So that could be a place where you get a lot of mutations accumulating.
Could be, but I think that Paul and Theodora really dispelled that.
How so?
Well, they said when you go back to the sequence at the very beginning, you can see the variants.
Right, you can see very, very small amounts of one or two separately, but not all together as many of these are. That's the difference. Yeah.
Doesn't have to be that it was in a long-term patient. Maybe two of them recombined, and then they picked up two, and then you had another recombination event a month later, and you picked up another four. I mean, the fact that they were present, the fact that they said that they were present, if you go way, way back and look at the sequences with a microscope suggests that there are multiple ways to get it. It's not just this long-term patient idea. It could be, I had 6 different recombination events.
Yep. Masha wants to know if we think nasally administered vaccines would provide long-lasting immunity.
I think they'll provide better immunity than intramuscular administered ones.
Especially for a respiratory pathogen, right? That makes sense. And flu mist is an example of a nasally administered vaccine, which I think is very good.
Yeah, but just based off of the fact that it's unclear to me that this intramuscular inoculation induces a mucosal IgA response, right? And if you go to Theodora and Paul's paper that was published back to back by another group's paper, it seems that they think that IgA at the mucosal surface is the critical regulator, whereas someone today thinks that IgM is a critical regulator. But we're only measuring IgG.
Is it common for researchers from one country to share virus with another? Absolutely.
For sure. For sure.
Within countries, across borders, absolutely. That's how we work. We share viruses, and that's how science progresses. It's not so easy to get them internationally, but it can be done.
Shh.
If you wanted to study viruses, would it be better to have a microbiology or virology degree?
I didn't know that there was a major called virology. Vincent, have you been moonlighting?
No, it's very few places have. We're talking about undergraduate BS. Very few places have virology majors. Microbiology, yes.
What has a major? What university do you know of that has a major in virology?
I don't know of any. You mean undergraduate? I don't know of any. But microbiology, yes, right?
Yeah, I would think so. But
what did you
even
major in, Amy? You're a virologist.
Yeah, but I majored in biology and history.
I majored in biology, and we're both virologists. So just good science is what you need, I think.
For sure. No, you actually need more, not good science. You need curiosity.
Yes. And how about passion, Amy? Do you need passion?
For sure.
Xiaowen wants to know, is it true one conceptual advantage of mRNA vaccine is that you can change it quickly, adapting to emerging mutants? If so, does the new mRNA vaccine need to go through all 3 clinical trials? No. Just a small phase 1 should be enough. That's what they do with the flu vaccines when they revise them every year or so. They just do a small phase 1. You can do it in 6 weeks or less.
Just plug it into the flu network. Why do you need to reinvent the wheel?
Yeah, I totally agree.
What's so funny?
Is this true? The WHO said one of the possible causes was frozen foods. I thought you said they ruled it out, Amy, right?
Yeah. They're not really believing this.
But it's somewhere outside of Wuhan, right?
Well, this idea the frozen food is directly connected. The frozen food came and went, and you bought it at the wet market. However, this totally ignores the fact that the first cases were not associated with the wet market.
Yeah.
So let's not focus on the details. No need to focus on the details or the truth.
Charles says, if there are 2 different variants in the U.S., how will Pfizer and J&J develop vaccines for both? Well, first you find out if you have to, if they are different enough that they are not neutralized by sera from people who have been vaccinated. And you can do that in the lab very easily. It's a neutralization assay. Amy does them all the time with different viruses, of course. And if you find a difference, then you might want to make a new mRNA variant. That's right. But I don't think you would have, well, you could have 2 different spikes. Depends on how many are circulating and how many are a problem. The flu vaccine has 4 components in it, 4 different viruses. So that's okay. So this is a common question, Wendy. This is your sister, I think, Amy, right?
No, that doesn't look like Gordo.
Oh, that's not the dog. Okay. Why would it be that lockdown reduces incidence of other circulating viruses but not SARS-CoV-2? What do you think, Amy?
Well, I think that for most of those circulating viruses, they're no longer novel. We have pre-existing immunity, so you're not so susceptible to them.
Yeah, I think that's it.
And stuff. And who knows, we're not testing babies and young children, so who knows? But yeah, I don't think that's Gordy. That doesn't look like Gordy.
Amy's sister is Wendy, and she has a dog, and I thought this was her sister, but she probably doesn't even know you do a live stream, right?
I think she does. I think it's gone around my family. I'm not sure. I don't pay attention.
How can single amino acid changes explain a few epitope changes that can totally escape antibody assay against many epitopes?
Well, if you are 3 contact points and each one is equal, or one is more dominant than the other, and you change that position, the antibody doesn't bind very well.
But there's with polyclonal sera, there's no total escape. There's just reduced neutralization so far, right?
Right.
With monoclonals, there can be total escape because it's a single epitope that you change. Right. 1 amino acid is all it takes.
Well, sometimes, yes.
Sometimes, yeah.
Depends on what the epitope is. People don't understand. Epitopes are complex. Some epitopes are discontinuous. Some epitopes are we think are 3-dimensional. It's not just,
If you have monoclonals and recovered, should she even need a vaccine?
Yes, because monoclonals are not your own immune system. You have to have your own immune system programmed. They are the final product of your immune system, but your immune system, therefore, is not programmed to make the final product.
Is there much chance of recombination between SARS-CoV-2 and a non-coronavirus?
No.
Amy is the guru of recombination among RNA viruses.
No, I'm not. My friend is, but no, there is not.
Usually it's within the same...
It's within the same
Species.
family. Yes. It's only within the same species. You don't see SARS-CoV-2 recombine with 229E, which is, I believe, an alpha.
Why is there so many uncertainties about fomite transmission? Well, we can't do experiments to measure it. We do know the virus will retain infectivity on certain surfaces for a few days. And so you think it might occur. And then who told me that 10% of the transmission is fomite? Was that Christian Drosten? That might have been.
Yeah, sounds like it.
So most of it is droplets and a small amount is fomites. Here's a good one. Why does measles have such a high R0? Why it can infect like 15 to 20 people on average? Isn't every respiratory virus droplet spread? So there are different sizes of droplets. The large and intermediate size are the SARS-CoV-2 containing droplets, which fall to the ground within 6 feet. And then we have the aerosols, which can go 100, 150 feet, and measles virus is in those. So it's not just virus floating around. It's always within a droplet. So measles is in these very fine mists that can go to the back of a classroom. Right, Amy?
Yeah.
Works for you?
Sure.
Here's a really good question. How will we possibly be able to make a new vaccine for new variants and revaccinate everyone? next season.
Considering the rate we're
Yes.
vaccinated.
So here's the thing.
You forgot the last caveat, which is
Well,
like
that's the best
the
part.
point.
I agree.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I agree. That's a big problem. So the idea is we get everyone vaccinated now, and we cut down transmission so that we don't have as many variants arising. And then maybe in a year or two, we change the formulation of the vaccine. And it's like a flu shot. Many people get a new flu shot every year. You do that, Amy, right? Oh,
Yeah.
we went this year together. I remember that.
Did.
Yeah.
We were harpooned together. My arm hurt. Your arm did not.
Yeah, we go every year, and that's the same thing that we'll do with SARS-CoV-2. But, not all of the U.S. gets a flu shot. What, about half of the population? And so that's, that cuts it down somewhat.
Yeah, and still 100,000 people die, right?
Thank you, Susan. I'm glad you like the pods in these live streams. I appreciate it. Ooh, Raphael had a CT of 18, so that's quite a bit of RNA. What was our friend's CT, Amy? Do you remember?
Ian was 11.
So you might have a good response, but as Amy said, you might be one of the non-responders. Amy, explain what is phylogenetics.
I'm not the virus evolutionist. That's you.
Phylogenetics is when you take genome sequences and you use them to construct phylogenetic trees, trees of life that you make with animals of various sorts. In the old days, we used to look at the animals, measure them, look at the features, and then put them on an evolutionary tree. We don't have to do that anymore. We determine their genome sequences, and we use a computer to say who's the most familiar, and you can construct the tree. That's phylogenetics. How old is coronaviruses? Oh, many, many thousands of years old. Maybe tens, hundreds of thousands. They've been around before Homo sapiens, for sure.
Three more questions.
And you're going to go work? Oh, it's 8:42 already. Time flies, Amy.
Yeah.
I heard that about 40 people got COVID, got thrombocytopenia. Is this a rate similar to most vaccines, or is something unusual? Well, you have to look at the control group, unless this is not the trial anymore, and this is in the population. But maybe they would have gotten it anyway.
It's in the population, and it's not. It's a rate that's seen for other things. It's not unusual at all. There was a whole article about it in either the Journal or the Times. I forgot where I read it.
Amy, is Israel still blocking vaccination for Palestinians? And if they're 100% by March, including them?
I have no idea. I would assume so. I believe that they're vaccinating in the West Bank and in Gaza. I mean, it wouldn't make sense otherwise.
Yeah.
Because then it's just going to, yeah. So, I love the dry sense of humor. Yes.
Do you have a dry sense of humor? Yeah.
Yes.
Cheryl, yeah, the guests on 717 said they saw these variants at very low levels last spring. Why all the hubbub? Good question. I think that the UK was doing a lot of histrionics, and now, I mean, I do think the antibody escape variants are worth looking at, but I agree, they've been around, and we are very frustrated with this. One more, Amy?
Sure. Did you call me Kathy?
Who's Kathy? I don't even know who Kathy is.
Could have sworn I was going in that direction. There's somebody who says his mom is 96, a polio survivor with post-polio syndrome. Extends her warmest regards.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't even see that one yet. Is the UK variant rearing its ugly head? So it depends where you look. It's been spreading a lot in Florida, but not in California, because there's a different variant that's competing with it. So that's really the key here. These variants can drive through a population, but if there's another one that's more fit, it will displace it. So it really doesn't have anything to do with, absolute ability to go through droplets from one person to another. But I've said
Yeah,
that
you might
many
want to
times.
tell like the CDC and stuff who are predicting that by March it's going to be the predominant variant and scaring the pants off of most people.
I'm not buying that. All right, one more, Amy, okay?
So,
What's the most critical structure of the COVID-2 spike that could inhibit antibodies produced by the vaccine?
I think it depends on who you talk to.
You don't think it's the RBD?
No, not
No?
necessarily. The NTD is very important, and there's a lot of epitopes and neutralizing epitopes in the NTD. And I believe that's even what Paul pointed out on Sunday's Twit, was the fact that there are a ton of neutralizing epitopes in the NTD, and we seem to be ignoring stuff like that. Didn't he
Thank you.
mention it?
Yeah, he
I
did.
could have sworn. So, yeah.
I don't think it's
All
well
right.
studied, though. Thank you, Amy.
All right. Intracranial inoculations tomorrow. Get your
I'll
needle.
see you tomorrow. Yep.
Yeah, you got your needle?
And many.
Yeah, all
All right.
right.
I'll see you in the morning.
All
Bye.
right. All right. Bye.
Okay, folks. It's me. Can COVID vaccine prevent viral transmission without inducing IgA mucosal immunity? It's a good question. It's possible that because other antibodies like IgG can cross into the mucosal tissues. So if you had high serum IgG, it's possible that could go in and do it. I think IgA is important, but it's sort of overrated, and I think there's some people who have a deficiency in IgA, and they don't get that many more respiratory infections than other people. So it might be able to prevent transmission without inducing mucosal IgA. But I must say, we talked today on immune, and the people that they have studied, this is the Nussensweig group, who have recovered from mild COVID, they have a lot of persisting mucosal IgA, so it's probably important. Do Chinese bats migrate to other countries? So my understanding is in general they do not migrate. I mean, some bats can migrate long distances, but others are, they stay within 10, 15 kilometers. So obviously if the bat is right on the border, it could go to another country. But many countries have SARS-like coronaviruses in them. So it could, in theory, happen anywhere. So here's another interesting one. What do you think about the resurgence in Manaus, despite the high seroprevalence? I'm wondering what that is myself. So you got all the bullet points there, right? Waning immunity. I don't think it is, because within 6 months you should still have enough antibodies. Could be a variant. Maybe the seroprevalence is wrong. Maybe that number is wrong. Something is wrong about it. So I think all of those are options, and we have to find out what's going on there for sure. Absolutely. Well, what will be the final outcome? It's going to end at some point. So, and probably within 2 years. Why do I think that? First, the 1918 influenza pandemic, which was even worse than this one, we couldn't do anything. We had no way to make antivirals or vaccines or anything, and that stopped within 2 years. So, probably due to population immunity, eventually the virus infected so many people, and we're intervening. We have monoclonals, we have vaccines, and so forth. So this will end, and I think right now people are scared to a certain extent because the press and the CDC are scaring people, and I don't think it's warranted. We have good vaccines that are going to be rolled out. The real problem is getting the vaccines out, right? It's not the science anymore. So I think, let's see, 2020 was a year, I think by the end of 2021, it'll be very low levels, but the virus will stay. It won't go anywhere. And it will be infecting people every year, but hopefully with high population immunity and vaccines, we'll be able to keep the deaths very low. If a wild animal gets a virus and loses its taste and smell, could it die as a result? For sure, animals depend on smell. So ants can't see, and they depend on smell to do everything. And you can, in the lab, knock out the ability of ants to smell, and they lose their social structure. They can't find food anymore. So absolutely. Anything, in the wild, anything that compromises the biology of an animal, it can be lethal. Because with humans, we have medicine to take care of people when they're sick. A great question. Really like it. Yep. So you guys have great conversation here. I'm sorry, I'm only about 3/4 of the way down to. We talked about this last time. There are a few amino acids similar between the spike and syncytin, which is the protein that causes in part the fusion of cells to make the placenta. But yes, Carolina just said syncytin. That's it. But that is not really an issue. That's been discounted. Are the variants caused just by random mutation? Well, they initially emerge by random mutation, right? Because RNA viruses have a high mutation rate. And then they're there. And if they're deleterious to the virus then disappears with that mutation. If they're neutral, they may stay for a while. And there are many of those. And then they may confer a benefit. So if they confer resistance to an antibody, they would be selected, and you see more and more of them, and they would move through the population. So that's what's happening with a lot of these variants. Could you get an mRNA vaccine within 28 days of getting a live vaccine like MMR? So MMR is a different beast. So in general, Daniel Griffin has said that, yes, you can. But, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a physician. So consult your physician. How do we know if the base substitutions in the regulatory regions change the biology? No, we don't. That's a good question. For example, many of these variants have a deletion of a protein called ORF8. Nobody's talking about it, but that could actually make the virus less lethal, and therefore might transmit better because more people are having asymptomatic infections, right? So, but these are not getting much attention. Mostly the antibody interacting amino acids are getting all the attention. Why is it so hard to create an accurate, non-invasive, real-time COVID test like pregnancy? Yeah. Yes. We used to call this a lick-a-stick. You put antibodies, you would put protein on a little stick, like a pH paper, and you'd lick it, and in 10 minutes, you could see if you had, it was an antigen test. Sorry, you put antibodies on the stick. And 10 minutes, $1 a test or less. Yeah, it would be a game changer. You could test every day, but I don't know. Companies tell me it's hard to do. I thought we would have it months ago. Do ACE inhibitors have any effect? No, they have no effect. And blood type has been ruled out as having an effect. That was just, these are early associations, and when you try and prove them, they fall apart in some cases. So why are people talking about them? I don't know. I'm not talking about them anymore, but people always ask me about them. The press keeps repeating this stuff. So the scientists are not. Is being HIV positive complicating mRNA-based vaccine? No, you can get an mRNA-based vaccine. If your AIDS is under control with triple therapy, that's fine. All right, let's take this one. It's possible that mutations shared globally without evidence of cross-contamination result from codon optimization as a non-native virus travels to find hosts with mutagenic codon tables. I think that's a pretty complicated hypothesis. I think shared mutations that you see in different variants globally are reflecting immune pressure right now because our population is growing in the fraction that's immunopositive, right? And that's putting pressure. And that's why these spike variants are being seen at higher frequency now than we did before. Do you think COVID got directly into humans or through an intermediate host? I just don't know. Every other human coronavirus came from an intermediate host. All of them, the 4 common colds, SARS-1, MERS. So you do the math, right? On the other hand, it could be different because we're always surprised. So I don't know. I know that didn't answer your question, but that's what I think. I think it probably did come through an intermediate. Is it safe to get mRNA vaccines yearly? Sure. It's like getting any other vaccine yearly. It's absolutely fine. Many people are afraid because they're new, but I think they will be de rigueur and will replace a lot of other vaccines for sure. So look at Mike. He puts the @Vincent Racaniello. That's a good way to. So I don't know. A lot of you are talking amongst yourselves. That's why I have to scroll through the chat, right? But if you put an @Vinny or Vincent Racaniello or Prof VRR, it really gets my attention. Is it safe to get them yearly? Yes. I think I just answered that, right? It is, I think. Well, we don't know for sure because we haven't ever done it, but I don't see any reason why it should not be. The wet market theories have come crashing down. Well, the one wet market in Wuhan didn't pan out, but there are others. I'm waiting to see what this WHO committee does. Frankly, they were there for 2 weeks. How can they learn anything in 2 weeks? They didn't do any experiments. They're just talking and gathering data. I'm a little skeptical, but we'll see. Will we need a third boost? I don't think so. I think probably the next year we would do that. Does the J&J viral vector vaccine create a better immune response in the nasal passages and lungs since it's so the J&J is not a nasal spray. It's an injected adenovirus. There's another company, though, making it. Well, maybe it's J&J. Maybe they're making another vaccine. Pardon me. The hope is that it would create a better local immune response. That's right. And there's another approach that another company is pursuing. They're using an adenovirus vector for spike, and they're putting the adenovirus in a capsule, which you take orally, and it goes through your stomach into your intestine, and there it comes apart. And the adenovirus infects the intestine and immunizes that mucosa. And when you immunize one mucosa, you tend to immunize others. So maybe that would work. But as far as I know, it's early in testing. All right, an epitope. Sorry, an epitope is an short amino acid sequence. As you know, proteins are made of chains of amino acids, and epitopes are like 15 amino acids, and that's what an antibody recognizes. So antibodies are what you make in response to foreign viruses and bacteria, and antibodies to the spike bind the spike and block it from infecting cells, and each antibody binds an epitope. And so that's why we're talking about if you have an amino acid change in the epitope, it could block the antibody from binding. Ask questions like that. Anyone doesn't understand what we're saying? Absolutely. If serum from phase 3 shows that a variant can escape a neutralization assay, will the T cell against the variant still be meaningful? Well, yeah, this is a very good question. So far, these assays that I've seen that you mentioned, serum from a phase 3 study, and you check against a variant wherever it's from, they've reduced neutralization but not eliminated it. And Moderna so far has said they still see enough neutralization that they believe it will be protective against serious disease. But what about T cells? Yeah, we're not measuring T cells. Maybe they would provide some protection because the T cell epitopes are different, right? And I think they are changing, but they're not getting as much attention. So, good question. Absolutely. I want to know if it's safe after getting vaccinated. I don't know what you mean by safe. Can you go to work? Well, if you do the distancing and masking and all that, you can, I think. It's up to the individual places, and some places have different procedures than others. But you will not get sick. Once you're vaccinated with both doses, you're not going to get COVID, right? But you might still get infected, but you're not going to get sick. COVID R naught is 1 to 3, 2 to 3. And so you can change it. Yeah, if you get it to 1 or below, you can stop the epidemic. And many countries have done that. So it's possible. It is higher than many commons, but others are higher than it as well, like SARS-1 and certain influenzas and so forth. Why does the second dose of the Pfizer Moderna cause more side effects? The second dose you have now you have a memory response. So after the first dose, you establish memory, immune memory. And now the second dose, you have a lot of cells now that are programmed to recognize the spike, and they respond quickly and strongly. So you get a lot of response, and that's why the second gives you worse side effects. And the first dose in people who have already been infected does a similar thing, right? Because again, you have memory caused in that case by infection. 74 degrees in Boca Raton. So Amy's gone. I'm awfully sorry. I'm just getting to questions for Amy. But sorry, the stream is delayed. If the J&J works better against the variants than AstraZeneca, could it be because of the pre-fusion spike? Well, it's possible. The pre-fusion conformation is not, as you know, in the AstraZeneca. And my understanding is that the pre-fusion spike gives you higher protein levels. That's what Jason McClellan told us a couple of weeks ago. So that's one possibility. But also remember, they're different vectors. So that could be part of it as well. The J&J is a human ad. The AstraZeneca is a chimp adenovirus. So the chimp may not be as good at making antigen as the J&J. So there's a lot of variables there, right? I'm going to go to the, let's see. Wednesday night has become my favorite night. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So, Robbie, I haven't seen this article, Variation in CT. So the CT value, as you know, is a measure how many cycles it takes for the PCR test to be positive. Low CT, a lot of RNA. High CT, like 34 and up, very little RNA. Probably not infectious. But that can vary by machine. It can vary by primers, yes. So you can't just say CT 34 and up, you're not infectious, because it could depend on the machine. And I don't know what's going to be done about that. What came first, the host or the virus? Well, so viruses need hosts. So the cells came first, probably. So here's what the idea is, that first on Earth there were organic molecules, and then self-reproducing RNAs arose. They could duplicate themselves without cells, and we can actually reproduce this now in the laboratory. We can make certain kinds of RNAs that will self-replicate. Those gave rise to cells eventually, and then the RNAs went into the cells because it was a less hostile environment, and that was the beginning of viruses. That's what we think. Is it normal for children to have little or no antibody levels? I'm not aware of that. I don't see why they would not have little or no antibody levels. Oh, here's the polio survivor. Okay, if I get a chance to get vaccinated, what should I have in the medicine cabinet? Well, if you've had allergic reactions, well, first of all, you're going to sit 15 minutes after you're vaccinated to make sure you don't have an allergic reaction. And if you do, they're going to have, an EpiPen ready for you. And then you're going to go home. You're going to get a sore arm. You might get a headache. Amy, after her second shot, got headaches. So whatever you would take for a headache or muscle soreness, you can take. It's all good. Oh, look at this. Your mom is a polio survivor with post-polio. Hello. Very, very happy to hear about it. Yeah, and polio is almost gone. Hopefully we can do that in the next few years. So type 3, there are 3 serotypes of polio, 1, 2, and 3. Type 2 was eradicated. Type 3 has just been recently declared eradicated. And every time they eradicate one, we have to destroy all our viral stocks. So we just were told by CDC to destroy our type 3 stocks, which of course we will do. How does altitude affect the aerosols? At higher altitudes, including aircraft cabins, which are usually 6,000 to 7,000 feet, it seems they would have to fall sooner because the air is thinner or something like that. But there's also top-to-bottom air circulation, which would probably push it down, right? So that's what I would say is happening. I'm not sure what the effect of air is. That's probably known. Why does CDC say 15 minutes of exposure to get infected? Yeah, they've been saying that for a long time because they feel that in their observations, when infected people are in rooms for that amount of time, but not less, they have a greater likelihood of being infected, right? So they do observational studies, and that's what they base it on. So you're within 6 feet of another person for 15 minutes minimum, and that's the recipe for getting infected. Hey there, Yang from the Philippines. Enjoy yourself in that nice warm weather. What are my thoughts on the waning? So I think the waning of cases is real. I think the big burst we just had was the post-holiday burst. We knew it was coming. I think that's over. The immunity of the population is going up, and we're vaccinating. And I think all of that is combining to take care of this. I don't think, I do think it's a wane. I don't think we're going to have another wave, frankly. But I could be wrong. Sam, this is a question I get a lot. If adults are vaccinated and kids can't be until 2022, are they in danger? So it's not a good situation, right? 18 and younger can't get vaccinated because they weren't included in the clinical trials. So what do? You get all the adults vaccinated and hope that reduces transmission so the kids won't get infected. So I think it will reduce the likelihood they'll be infected. Some kids will get infected, but the kids do get sick, but at a lower frequency than adults. So that's the only mitigating factor. There's really nothing else we can do about it. So I think in schools, if they maintain precautions for a while, that should be okay. Yeah, now that Amy's gone, yes, I accidentally called her Kathy Spindler. And she gets mad at that. And you find it funny, and I agree. But I sometimes do that. Okay, now we're just at the part where Amy is leaving. Ay. Okay, comment about measles wafting in small droplets. Why would its droplet size differ? So we all exhale the same range of droplet sizes, right? And the smaller droplets have less virus because they have less volume. So the measles virus is more infectious, so the smaller number of viruses in the droplet, in the small droplet, are still enough to infect you. That is my take on it. But yes, surface charge could also have a part in that. But I think it's mainly that the small amount of viruses in a small particle are still quite infectious. If it turns out that we have to take yearly vaccines and the second shot flattened you, would it follow that a third shot would cause even stronger reactogenicity? Probably not, because it is the second one where you have that first memory response, right? And by the third one, you're not going to see the same thing. No. So my understanding is the third and beyond is not an issue. Yeah, Archive TWIV is good. There's a lot of good ones back there. Hardly anyone listens to them. Why are bats... Oh, let me do John's first. Is it safe to think of a virus like you would a seed? So I guess in a way you could, because a seed requires nutrients, but then it will grow on its own. A seed does not require another cell to grow in. It makes its own cell, right? So a virus is different because a virus needs to get into a cell, but then the infected cell is alive, whereas the virus is not. So the analogy isn't perfect, but it's not bad. All right, why are bats such good pools for novel viruses? That's a question many people are interested in. They seem to have really good immune systems to deal with flight. You know, flight burns a lot of oxygen, it makes radicals, and the immune system deals with those. So they're ramped up, and maybe that's part of it. So a few labs in the world are studying it. They have bat colonies, and they're doing the experiments. And so bats, yeah, that may be why they have a lot of viruses, and they're 20% of mammals, so there are a ton of them out there. Is having more pronounced and nasty symptoms after getting COVID vaccine correlated with having better antibody levels or immunity? No, it's not, because the response is not just an antibody response. It's inflammatory proteins that you make, so it doesn't necessarily correlate with better antibodies or immunity in general. What is the estimated prevalence? Yeah, so there is an article by there's an interview with Jeff Shaman, who's a Columbia epidemiologist, on NPR. And he says it's up to 5 times more cases than we think, based on modeling. So if you'd like, I can put that in the show. I will put that in the chat. No, it's on a different computer here. I'm going to put that in the chat because it's a really interesting article. Hold on one second. I will find that from my most recent TWIV. I'm going to get him on, and here we go. NPR, why the pandemic is 10 times worse than you think. That's what he says. Here's it going in the chat. Right now that I went all the way down to the bottom. Okay. Can you have Mrna back? I will try. Yeah. I will try to do that. So we have lateral flow assay correct for antigen and antibody. And that's like the pregnancy test. So you're right. I was thinking of something even cheaper, like less than $1. That's the Mrna test, where you have a little flexible pH paper type thing that you just lick. The ones we have are more expensive, and you need one that people could do every day, and that would really do it. What's the fate of RNA vaccine? After 3 or 4 days, it's gone. The RNA is degraded, and there's no more. And the Pfizer and Moderna have looked at that in animals, and there's no question it goes away. It doesn't transform itself into an infectious particle. Absolutely not. Is the vaccine safe for people who are asymptomatic but have a COVID infection? So, yes, it's fine, but it's not recommended that you have it concurrently with an infection of any kind, right? That's usually the case with vaccines, so there's no interference. But I understand if you're asymptomatic, you don't know it, but I don't think it's going to be unsafe. What do I think of the idea that variants are happening in people's own bodies? I think, well, that's where they're arising, of course. Where else would they arise, right? Because we're the only, well, they could arise in animals. We know minks spawn variants, for example, but in the hosts, for sure, that's where they're arising. Mrna is grouchy because we don't have a lick a stick. Yeah, maybe. Maybe he is. The 117 is a stop code on that truncates ORF8. Yes, that's a deletion of that protein, and it has some consequence, although we're not quite sure what it is. Is loss of smell and taste considered a mild? I believe it's considered a moderate symptom. That's my understanding. How did South Africa get such a, well, I don't know about virulent, but it's driving through the population. It has these spike changes that make antibodies difficult to interact with. How did it do that? We have no idea, but one theory is that it was in a person in which the virus was reproducing for a long period of time, like someone who was immunosuppressed. Yes, I mean, I'm not impressed with... Well, let's see what they say from this China trip of WHO. I would like to get Peter Daszak back on and see what he has to say. But I'm not impressed so far. Is there any correlation between vaccine reactogenicity and efficacy? No, there is none. If you have no reaction, you'll be protected, most likely. Is it reasonable to expect that the vaccines currently EUA'd will be safe for children? Yes, absolutely. I just think that in our country, we have the FDA, which says you have to do clinical trials before you can use a vaccine in a certain population. Raphael, every time I see a doomsday headline, I hear you say they need to say, yeah, they do. That's what news. A headline is supposed to say something new, so they have to get things that are new each time. If a virus has a 1 in 1,000 rate of error and you expand that to millions of infections, wouldn't the projection show all chances of change will happen? Well, it's actually 1 in 10,000 or 1 in 100,000, so it's a little lower, but still it's a lot, you bet. However, the total number of mutations that you can have in a genome of 30,000 bases is 4 to the 30,000th power. That's more than all the atoms in the visible universe. So we're not even close to exploring all the mutational space of these viruses. How do you distinguish coronas? Now it's all by nucleotide sequence. We place them in genera and families and orders by sequence, yes. They're all coronaviruses because they have, a plus-stranded RNA genome that's big, an envelope particle with a corona-like spike, but then in the end you do the genome sequence and you identify it. And, when they first when they first isolated SARS-CoV-2 in Wuhan, they looked at it under the EM and they said, oh, it looks like a coronavirus. And then they got the genome sequence and confirmed that. So people on immunosuppressive drugs yes, they're going to have a poor vaccine response for sure. And those are people who are candidates for monoclonal therapy if they don't make good responses, right? Your son went from Massachusetts to New Hampshire. Should he be on lockdown or quarantine? It's no longer 14 days. It's like 9 days now. It depends on the state, right? So if I know going into Mass from another state, from most other states, you have a quarantine, but it doesn't have to be the CDC says 9 days is okay. Likelihood of the virus being brought into Wuhan via frozen goods. I think that the WHO committee ruled it out. But let's see what they have to say for sure. Epitopes can be slightly longer. B-cell, T-cell epitopes are slightly different. But I'm not good with numbers, so you may be right. Would vaccination by household make more sense when using a non-sterilizing vaccine than just vaccinating one household member? Yeah, it would make more sense for sure. Unfortunately, we don't yet know what the effect is on transmission. There's some hints so far in a few trials that it might reduce transmission. It's not going to be 100%, but that's a good idea. I like that idea. Boulder Hiker Boy. If SARS-CoV was the infectious agent in 1918 instead of influenza, how do you think the infection curves, mortality, and duration would have differed? Hard to know because there was a war going on, right? Or there had just been a war. There were a lot of troop movements, and that really played into it. And so, there were multiple waves in 1918. It may have looked very similar, but now we're trying to intervene, which we couldn't do in 1918. So all kinds of differences. Does the folding of an epitope determine how the antibody recognizes it? Yeah, there are some that have. So some epitopes are just based on the linear amino acid sequence. Some are based on the folding of it. And so it can have, yes, a sequence could have multiple binding sites for antibodies, for sure. No question about that. So this one we just answered. The difference, the first and second dose, is that the second one you have an immune response that gives you the more intense symptoms. Anti-vaxxers keep claiming the virus hasn't been isolated. How has it been isolated? Sequencing, plaque assays, electron microscope. Yes, all of the above. They took the first patients with pneumonia in Wuhan. They put a tube into their lungs, pulled out some fluid. They looked at it under the electron microscope. There were coronaviruses there. They put it on cells in the lab. The cells died, and they got virus out. And then they sequenced it, and the genome said it was a coronavirus. And then they did plaque assays. So I don't know what else you would want. I've been doing this 40 years, and that's what it's all about. That's what you do. Do we know if the variants persist longer on surfaces? I think those are underway. I'd be surprised if they did, but we'll see. Will there be a steady stream of new variants as the virus encounters more and more Sero-Positive people? Could be, yes. Could be, because a lot of amino acids, as Paul Benash said Friday on Twiv, the spike is very plastic. It can change. It's like putty. And so, yeah, we could see a steady stream, or as we cut down the infections by vaccination and the natural ending of the pandemic, maybe that would help too. The fewer people infected, the better. I worry a little bit, but I'm not freaking out. I don't have doomsday thoughts. If you have zero reaction to either shot, it doesn't mean anything. You're just as likely to be protected. Some people, the same person, Amy, some years gets big reaction to flu vaccine, the next year none. It doesn't matter. So if you get a reaction, you know that you got the vaccine. But if you didn't, it doesn't matter. How could a natural infection not be as good or better? So it depends on the virus. Some cases, the vaccine is better because you put more of the protein. So the human papilloma vaccine is better than the natural infection because you get a ton of the capsid protein, which you would never get in a normal infection, a regular infection. So the immunity is better, right? And for others, natural infection is better. So it depends on the virus. But that's how a vaccine could be better. If only 65 or 70% of the USA gets immunized, can we achieve herd immunity? Yeah, I mean, here, let me show you my slide that I made some time ago. This is the R naught for SARS-CoV-2 is 2 to 3. This is the formula to calculate the fraction of people that must be immune to prevent virus spread, 50 to 70%. It's probably higher up. It's more near 70. It should do it. We'll see. We're not quite there yet, right? I'm sorry. I'm very sorry I missed your question. I don't mean to. I do my best. Why are T-cell epitopes different than antibody? Because they're presented to the immune cells in different ways. There's a T-cell receptor versus a B-cell receptor that's interacting with them. So it's a very different biology. Someone said, I passed a question that someone had a fundamental question. Where was that? Oh, here we go. What is a prefusion spike? So let me show you a picture. Yeah, I have a nice picture of this. Where is it? The last seminar I gave. Let's see. See if I can find that quickly. I don't want to keep you. All right, so, yeah, here it is. It's in my lecture, virus entry. That's lecture number 5. Here we go. Prefusion spike. Coronavirus. Here. Let me share my screen again. Okay, so there's the spike. It's the model of the spike protein. It's one protein. And that is in the prefusion conformation. This is the fusion conformation where the protein is extended so it could shove the tip into the membrane and it can fuse with the host cell. So most of the protective epitopes are in the prefusion conformation. So it turns out that if you put a couple of amino acids in the spike, 2 prolines, you lock it in this prefusion and it can't go to the postfusion, so you get many more epitopes exposed. It makes it makes more protein as well. Sorry, I missed that. I am mystified by asymptomatic transmission. If there's no hacking and coughing and hence no droplets, how does the virus get carried? Well, it turns out, Plinky, that you can make lots of droplets just by speaking and breathing. Breathing makes droplets, so that's how it happens, without coughing or sneezing, yeah. Why not use a decoy receptor? People are working on it, but you have to block a lot of surfaces. So with antibody blocking, you only need a few antibodies to bind. With decoy receptors, you have to saturate the spike, and that may be harder to do. And it's never really worked very well. What is meant by cleavage? So there are enzymes called proteases, like are in your stomach, that chop up your food, right? They chop up the proteins. Those are proteases. They cleave the polypeptide. The protein chain is cleaved. It's cut by the enzyme. How can one virion trigger a response in both the humoral and cytotoxic arms, where they need to be triggered by separate virions? So this all starts. It's a little complicated, but there are different cells that are involved. So most likely you have to have at least 2 virus-infected cells, yes, I would say. Is PLOS pathogens a good source for SARS-CoV-2 research? Yes, it is very good. I use papers from PLOS pathogens all the time for TWIV. Can the immunogenicity of vector viruses be messed with, reduced to deal with issues with the second dose? Yes, you can. So the Russian Sputnik vaccine, they use 2 different adenoviruses to deal with that. If you can also mess with the capsid sequence, yeah, and you can reduce the immunogenicity. So that, for example, if you have an adenovirus where there's a lot of population immunity, hard to use as a vector, so then you can just alter it so it's no longer recognized by population immunity. Yeah, that is going on actually for gene therapy. It's used a lot for adeno-associated virus vectors because You don't want population immunity to intervene. Susan's been following TWIV since Ebola. Yes, isn't that nice? Very nice. I really appreciate it. Why does South? I think I answered that. Yes, there are many female virologists for sure. Oh yes, we have a lot. We have just on TWIV we have Kathy and Brianne, and then there's Amy and many others. I could keep listing them, but not as many as men. Yes, I agree. I know I saw this postal worker with a TWIV t-shirt. Very cool. cafepress.com/TWIV. All right, it's 9:30, and now I see the link I just posted in. Okay. I don't understand how we're going to get schools open without rapid tests. Well, they're just going to be opened. As soon as the teachers are immunized, they're going to be opened because there's a push to get them open, as you know. They want kids to go back. We shouldn't eradicate bats. They are ecologically important for sure, and it would probably mess up the environment if we did that. Amy doesn't knowingly lie, so who said that is not true. She is the one person who does not lie. What will happen when respiratory viruses come back? That's a good question because we've had an interruption of immunity, right? But they're still here. They're just lower. So we'll just have larger outbreaks, but of course nothing as severe as this current pandemic for sure. Thank you, Trish, for your thoughts, and thanks everybody. I think that's it's it for tonight. I don't want to keep you. You guys can, come back next week. But for now, I just want to say good night to everybody, and have a good week, and stay safe. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it when you come and get involved with our chat. Come back next Wednesday. We'll be back. Good night.